JonathanKing10. Last week I told you about Cambridge University, my starting days and how it all began. Life was fun up at Cambridge. I was going to the Wim Coffee House. I wonder if that's still there, just down the road from Trinity College. I was going to lectures, which I enjoyed, studying English literature, and had some very good tutors there. And I was in my first year. Now, actually, I've found at that time and since actually that the first year at university is usually not that much fun. It's the second and third that are terrific fun. And so whilst I was enjoying myself, I was still finding it quite difficult to get to know where was everybody was doing this, that and the other. And I just joined the Cambridge Union, but that's a debating society, but it wasn't going anywhere particularly. And I was still worrying like mad. Why wasn't I a pop star? Or why wasn't I, at the very least, a pop producer? So I ended up stressed out like mad and collapsing with a duodenal ulcer. I remember the night before I was feeling a bit weak, and I'd gone out to dinner with my friends, to one of those, the equivalent then of the McDonald's, and Frank Walters, who was studying to be a doctor, said, no, you need a really good meal, a steak and some chips and everything else, which I had. Of course, it probably caused a tremendous puncture. During the night I was clearly passing blood because I kept fainting, and fainting is very different from going to sleep, believe me. And I woke up in the morning, the doctor was summoned, and sure enough they declared that I had internal bleeding. It was probably an ulcer, and I should immediately go to the university sanatorium, which was funnily enough based just opposite Trinity College. I could see the college gate out of the window there. And they diagnosed a duodenal ulcer and said I should lie in bed for several weeks and drink milk and eat lots of soft things like mashed eggs and fish, and it would heal up. That's what they used to heal ulcers with in the old days. So in about 3 or 4 days, I'd done my entire studies for the year. I'd read all the books I needed to read and done everything else, and I was bored. So, of course, I started writing to people in the music industry, desperately saying to them, please discover me, make me a star, please do something, with no result at all, except there was a disc jockey on Radio Luxembourg who used to present the Decca Records show, and I discovered he wasn't actually a disc jockey only at all. He was also the head of promotion at Decca Records. That's what they used to do in those days. On Radio Luxembourg, they used to buy slots, EMI and Decca and all the other ones, and they would advertise their records. You couldn't do it these days. Anyway, Tony, I have to say, was super. Wrote me back and said, I'd love to see you next time in London, pop in and visit me. Well, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was over the moon. And indeed, I went into his office at Great Marlborough Street and I met him and I told him what I was doing and I played him some of my songs and he said, these are a bit ordinary. You need to write something a bit more different. But, come back and see me and I'll give you advice. And I used to go in quite often after work was finished, about 7 or 7:30 in the evening, and found myself many times sitting with another couple of guys who he was encouraging, who he thought had some sort of talent, the same age as me, called Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. So there was Jonathan King, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, all hoping to become successful thanks to Tony Hall. And we all did. Many thanks, Tony, because he had all the patience in the world and he must have been exhausted after a busy day, but he was still prepared to see us and give us advice. And I went in with one song, which was not bad. It's called Green is the Grass. And he said, it's got some sort of potential. We might be able to get you a deal. Who do you like as producers? I said, well, I really rate Mickey Most and Andrew Lou Goldham, who produced the Rolling Stones, and whoever it is who produces the Zombies. And Tony said, look, I really don't think the morality of Mickey Most and Andrew Lou Goldham, much though I admire them both, would suit you. You should go and see the producers of the Zombies, who are two of the nicest and most decent men in the music industry. And they were called Joe Roncaroni and Ken Jones. I went to see Ken and Joe and their lovely secretary Carol, who remains my personal assistant to this day, 41 years later. And they liked the song and said, yes, we'll record it, good for you. Now go back to Cambridge and write us a B-side. So I had to troll all the way back to Cambridge and sit down and try and write a B-side. And I walked around the streets thinking to myself, oh, this'll do and that'll do. And in fact, I wrote 6 B-sides, all of which, I have to say, were equally as ghastly as green as the grass. Listen to them today. You can get them on my box set, a very cheap and reasonable price, www.kingofhits.com. You'll find it there. But anyway, most of them were rubbish. And then, relieved that I'd written them and put them on tape and being able to send them down to Ken and Joe in London, I wandered back around the streets, and I remember it was raining, it was cold, there was nobody out on the streets, and I suddenly got this idea, these empty streets full of people all alone, and I thought of the moon, and I looked up at the moon and thought of all the rather pretentious lyrics that Bob Dylan had written and people like that, and thought I could write a song that sort of sends that all up. And I wrote Everyone's Gone to the Moon, stuck it on the tape thinking this is actually the worst of all the songs I've written, but never mind. And I sent it down to Ken and Joe at Soho Square in London and awaited a reply from them. And a couple of days later called them up, and indeed they had got the tape. And guess what they said? Tune in, folks, to Jonathan King 11.